In the folder called Pen Tools Lab, you'll see a file called drvuuv.psd. And what do we got here? Oh no, the evil Dr. Vuuv has changed the welcome sign at Vuuv city limits. It's up to you to undo his evil work.
Just buy a new sign.
Buy a new sign? No, we have to fix it. We can do it. So, open up the file called drvuuv.psd, and it says start by throwing out the layer with his name on it. Let's take a look at what we got going here. When you open up the file, you'll see that we've got a series of layers. One of them is a type layer. Very cool. Look at the one on top. If we turn the eyeball off, okay, so there's Vuuv. The town is named Vuuv, and we got to get it back. How can we get rid of a layer? I mean, we could grab it, we could drag it onto the trash can icon. We could simply hit delete. You could right-click and choose delete layer. There's a bunch of ways you can get rid of the layer, but let's throw that out. Now you'll notice though, before it goes, it's not quite the same font as the top up there. It's a little bit different. And so let's see if we can figure out how he was able to put his name onto that sign, how he was able to change the original sign to his name. So let's delete that layer there. And take a look around. Where do you think he got the shape for his letters? We don't see anything in the layers panel, do we? We got some type down there. He's also changed the motto of the town. We'll have to fix that as well. But I don't see anything that he could have used to, unless, what if he used the pen tool? What does the pen tool create? You can create shapes with it. You can also create paths. And we don't see paths in the layers panel, do we? We don't see them in the channels panel. We can see our color channels in the channels panel. But if we look in the paths panel, look at that. There's some paths in there. If you click on the path, look at that. That looks an awful lot like the lettering that he had put up onto the sign. It was the shape of it anyway, isn't it? Vuuv, V-U-U-V. We got to change that to Vuuv. What do we got to do to this letter? We've got to turn it into a U, right? A V is basically 3 points. If I grab my pen tool, and how do we get the pen tool? What's the keyboard shortcut? Hit P on the keyboard, there's your pen tool. And if you hover over, you'll notice first off your pen tool has that little snowflake icon, suggesting that if we were to start clicking right now, it would make a new subpath on this path layer. How do we get that tool called up? That's the direct select tool that we can use to directly select things on the path. With the pen tool, hold down the command key. And when you click on it, look at what happens. We can see the points on that path. Now, instead of just moving these points around, if I click on a point, I can move it around. There's another tool called the Convert Point tool. And right now, it's just 3 points. If I did a point, 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 notice it connects them up with straight lines. But if I did a click and a drag, let's say I did a click and a drag somewhere, remember it pulls a little curve out of there. What if I were to use my Convert Point tool? Remember when you hold down the Option key, you can get the Convert Point tool from up here, you can grab it from the little point up there, or if you hold the Option key, nothing happens at first, but look at what happens when I hover over the point. So right now, this point here has no handles, but if I hold the Option key, click on it, and drag, it adds some handles to that line. Okay, so we know how to fix the V's. Same deal on the other V. I can hold down the command key. There's my direct select tool. When I click on it, it's highlighted. Hold down the Option key, and I can click and drag on that bottom point. So now our town is just called Ew. That's not very good. How can we turn these into V's? I mean, it's kind of the opposite, right? If I select this subpath here, hold down that command key, get the direct select, there's that subpath, and look, this little point down here has 2 handles coming off of it. The Convert Point tool lets us convert a point from either having handles or not having handles. When we did a click and a drag on the non-handled point, it pulled some handles out. If we just click, boink, on that point, it takes the handles away. So Option, click on the letter, the subpath, hold down the command key. When you hover over that point, you'll see the direct select tool, and you can click to remove the handles. Well, I think so far so good. We've been able to take the VUUV and turn it into UVVU. The problem is these thin blue lines aren't actually going to print. Like if I were to print this, it would look like that, or if I posted it to a website or something. You don't see a path, and I mean, just little thin blue lines like that isn't very visible anyway. We need to turn this into something more visible. And there's a feature in the Paths panel here where you can use a brush. Let's say I had some bright red paint here on a great big brush. If I stroke the path, it'll run. If I have a layer that I can actually add some pixels to, it'll run that brush over top of the path. Now in this case I had a hard, large, red brush, so it just ran that brush right across the entire path. If I had a soft brush, it would run a soft brush across the path. We need to make it look like the lettering on that sign. Pop into your layers panel and make a new transparent layer. We're going to be adding pixels to create the lettering of the sign. So I've made a new transparent layer here. Maybe not a bad idea to name it. This is going to be our Vuuv layer. And this is where that new lettering is going to appear. And then grab a paintbrush, and what color should that lettering be? You think white? Take a look at this. If we look at the sky is pretty bright. The lettering is actually darker than the sky. It's not white, is it? What color is it? Well, how could we find out what color it is? Well, we could use an eyedropper and we could click on it, and look at that. Our foreground color becomes the same color as the type. From the paintbrush tool, if you hold the Option key, you get the eyedropper, and if I click on that lettering, that's not quite white, is it? It's got kind of a warmish sort of tone to it. And as far as the size of it goes, I'm just going to try to get a brush that's about the same size, maybe a little bit larger, maybe a little bit wider than the lettering on the sign, and a hard edge. Look on that little pop-up at the top there. Let's give it a nice hard brush. So we've got a transparent layer in the Paths panel. Make sure you have the entire lettering ready to accept the type. If you have a single subpath selected, let's say I had just like this little subpath here selected, and I stroke it, it's only going to stroke that one subpath. To make sure I don't have any one of these selected more than the others, if you click off of the path, that deselects everything, and then just click back onto the path. And that way none of them are more selected than any other. And when you click the Stroke Path button, it runs that lettering over top of it. Okay, now you'll also notice that down below, there's another little sign down here. And let's see what this thing is telling us to do. Next, we're going to use the Freeform Pen tool. So we got the first part done. We started by throwing out the layer with his name on it. We modified the path that he used, making it once again spell Vuuv, and then we stroked the path with an appropriate brush and color to restore the sign to his former glory. Next, use the Freeform Pen tool in magnetic mode if you like. You're like, what is the Freeform Pen tool? Let's take a look at it. The regular pen tool looks like this, and you can make little, paths and stuff. Very nice. If you click and hold, there's a Freeform Pen tool, which lets you draw shapes. And there's a magnetic mode. Without the magnetic mode, let's say I click and start drawing. Let's say I'm outlining something, just like the Lasso tool. So this is without magnetic. You do a click, and you start drawing. And when you're done, it will convert that into a path. There's a few options for it. One of them is how tightly do you want it to try to match the curves? If you're going around hard edges, the curve fit, the larger the number, the more it's going to try to wrap onto the edge. And the magnetic option, you notice you've got width, contrast, and frequency. Let's say we wanted to change the color of this sign down below. Let's say we wanted to make it, he's used evil green. We want to use like a less evil color. With the regular Freeform Pen tool, you'd have to kind of find your way around the edges here. Notice if I go off the contrasting edges, it's quite happy to go off the contrasting edges. The magnetic mode means that it's going to lock onto those contrasting edges. So when I click and start dragging, if I go off the path a little bit, it finds the strongest contrast edge and locks onto it. So hopefully, once I get all the way around and come back to where I started, or when you come back to where you started. Remember with the pen tool, when you come back to where you started, you see that little circle icon appear, and when you click, that'll close off the path. When you're doing something fairly detailed, it's not a bad idea to zoom right in on it And take a look at this. If you get to the end of the screen, let's say I'm working my way around here and I get to the end of the screen, if you hold down the space bar, you'll get the hand tool, then you can click and drag to reorient yourself and then continue on. With some tools, as you get close to the edge, notice if I get close to the edge of the screen here, it automatically starts scrolling. But depending on how close you get to the edge, sometimes it can scroll really fast. By using the space bar, you get that hand tool, you can pan to a new location, let go of space, and continue on as though nothing had happened. And if it goes off the rails, let's say it accidentally jumps to a wrong spot, if you start backing up the path, it'll just keep making a new path. But if you hit the delete key, you can go backwards point by point. Wherever it puts down a point, if you hit delete, it'll delete the last point. Unfortunately, you don't really see the points as it makes it across. It's only when you close the path off or double click to stop making the path that it actually puts those points into place. Now, I noticed a lot of people have actually made this subpath, or this little path on the sign, on the same path as the Vuuv up there, which is not that big of a problem. Let's say I started here and I did my whole path around on here. You'd end up with something like, okay, probably a better job than that, but then something like this. You can see, here's the Vuuv at the top there, and here's this little subpath made on it. I did mine on a new path. If you've done it on the path up there, not a problem. We just need to get rid of these little 4 letters up above. And that's fairly easy to do with the direct select tool. Remember, if you hold down the command key, you get that little white arrow there, and all of these points on this path here, I'm going to want to get rid of. Now, right now, I've got the path down here selected, so if I hit delete, it would get rid of that path. But command key, direct select tool. If I just make like almost like a marqueed selection, I click and drag, makes a little box around that whole upper path. Notice all those points are selected. I can just hit delete, boink, and away they go. Now it does mean that this path is backwards, but that's okay. We're going to use this path to make an adjustment layer with a layer mask that changes the color of the sign. When you first make the layer mask, it's going to be the wrong way around. But how do we reverse a layer mask? How do we invert it? Command I will invert that layer mask. So whichever way you've gone, we've got this path or the gray path, let's load that up as a selection. So at the bottom of the paths panel, you'll see this little dotted circle icon. And if you click on it, you'll have a selection based on that path. Now, whenever you have an active selection and you make a new layer mask, that layer mask will be based on the selection. And whenever you make an adjustment layer, the adjustment layer will have a layer mask attached to it. So if I wanted to change the color of that sign, if I go to my hue and saturation adjustment layer, notice the selection disappears, but a layer mask has been created with that selection in mind. If I grab my hue slider, I can change that sign to any color I want. So give that a try. And if your layer mask came in the wrong way around, where it's affecting everything except the sign, a simple Command I will switch that around. All right, what else do we have to do to this? So we use the freeform pen tool, in magnetic mode if you like. We made a path around the smaller green sign below, and we non-destructively, using that hue and saturation layer, changed the green to a less evil color. And his motto is also quite evil, so we're going to make that into something less evil as well. Where evil is a way of life. How? How did he make this? Is that just pixels? If we zoom in, I see pixels in there. Is it pixels that he used to make that? Wait, look in the layers panel here. If we turn this eyeball off and on this capital T here, that's type, isn't it? And type is always editable. As long as we keep it as a type layer, if I grab my type tool, I can do a little click and a drag, and I can select that, and we could type in something else. Puppies and unicorns. So give it some kind of a less evil motto, and then we'll save that up.